'Cause I'm yours to keep if you want to.
Still a meaningful conversation between
Yeah.
friends, regardless.
No, for sure. It's like that's what's been so cool about doing these. I've
Right.
been enjoying that. You know,
Right.
like honestly, one of the biggest things for me was like, how often do I just do this? Like sit
Right.
with like no phone, no like distraction, no shit between like me and one other person,
Right.
and have like a just conversation. Like
Right.
that's been something I think too with like COVID that has just been like nice
A
to
lost
be able
art,
to
yeah.
reconnect to doing that.
Absolutely.
You know? So that's been super enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah, you know, there's no real format or anything. Like the basics for me are just like starting with like where are you from?
Right.
Where were you born?
Right. So I was born in Mississauga, Ontario, which is like a suburb of Toronto, probably about like 20-30 minutes out. Yeah. Only child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long did you live there?
I mean, my parents are still at the same house.
Damn, same house you were born in.
Same house I was born in.
Crazy. What was it like growing up there? Like, what's like the general? Is it like farming town? Is it sports culture? Is it like what's kind of the general feel of like the area?
It's a suburb. It's super multicultural. I mean, I was in like Catholic school until I was maybe grade 3, and then my parents felt I was like slipping a bit, maybe just because I was kind of like a little problem child, so they ended up shipping me to like private school, which was like in another town like not too far away called Oakville.
Okay.
So I was pretty much in prep for like from grade 3 all the way to finishing high school, because even to high school I went to like prep school. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
How did like your parents land in Canada?
My dad ended up like immigrating to Canada when he was like 25, and he worked his way up, and was kind of like the starting point of, because he's one of 9 from the Philippines.
Shit.
But he was the first one to come, and then he ended up sponsoring and slowly bringing the whole clan over one by one, to the point where now the whole papa side of all the siblings are all situated in Canada. And then he didn't end up meeting my mom till they were probably like 37, 38. But it was kind of like a last ditch effort for both of them, just because they were like super old, and like I think they were getting pressure on both their sides for like, oh, you guys are getting old, like you should get married. So my mom was in the Philippines at the time, and they were kind of just introduced kind of like the super old school way. They were just like writing each other for like years until he finally went back to the Philippines to meet her, and then ended up bringing them back, and then they got married. And then by the time my mom had me, she was like 40. So I think that was like the reason why I'm an only child. It's not like they didn't want more kids. It was just kind of like that was the last ditch effort, like, miracle child.
So you went to school, and then it was like a boarding school kind of situation when you were going through prep and all that?
Yeah. So the elementary private school I ended up going to was Fern Hill, but then it also was a feeder school into the high school, which was called like Appleby College, which was like a prep school.
Okay.
And it actually the last 2 years it's actually mandatory for you to board at the school, so that got me introduced to like the resident life at a super like early time, as opposed to like people that just start doing that in university. But
sure,
it was cool, in terms of just being able to like meet a lot of like international students.
Yeah.
And it just kind of opened my eyes to like a broader perspective of the world, meeting kids that would come from wherever in the world. Yeah.
Were there like subjects in school you gravitated to that were like your favorite things? Math, science? What was your boat?
I mean, for me, it was always like just the music and the arts. So like my mom is like a music teacher.
Cool.
That's kind of been her bread and butter as soon as she got to the country. Even when she was in the Philippines, like she was a music teacher at a school, and she kind of performed. she was like Maria in West Side Story in a big production in the Philippines. And
Cool.
when she came here, she pretty much taught, and still does to this day, teaches piano, voice, and music theory. So coming up, that was like it's kind of just in my blood. And my dad's super musical too. He can play the piano. He sang barbershop quartet. Like it's always just been around. So like naturally, I think as I got into like elementary, doing a lot of like participating in a lot of the school plays, and learning how to play, singing in choir, singing in or learning how to play sax for like jazz. Like that's kind of like art and drama is kind of like what anything from visual arts to like music to drama is kind of like what I really excelled in school.
Cool.
Yeah.
And did you go to university after that?
Yeah, I ended up going to the University of Waterloo for applied studies co-op. But it was kind of just like, I think coming out of the prep school system, which was like living on res especially was like super strict. Like, if you got caught outside, on the wrong hours, or if you were late to certain things, they'd like make you run the field. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
They were like, it was super disciplined, which I think prepped me in a lot of ways. But once I got into university and, I was on res there, it was just like, oh, it's co-ed dorms. Like, people are going out to drink. Like,
Yeah.
It was kind of like letting like a budgie outside in your backyard. Like, you just don't know what to do just because all of a sudden there's all this freedom. So, yeah, university was not really like, I wouldn't call it a waste because I never ended up finishing any like post-secondary in that sense. I just like, it was more so just like a lot of life lessons and building like a really strong network with folks that I met through school. But I was in and out of academic probation for like 2-3 years, to the point where I was just like, this is just not for me.
And what about like work history wise? What was your first job?
My first job, I think I did like a lot of like warehouse jobs for like just like agency work, like super mundane, just like manual labor stuff. And then I worked for this place called Hershey Center, which was like a huge like kind of like skating rink, where like a lot of like the minor league hockey teams would like play in.
Okay.
So I just worked with the staff over there. But other than that, I've always just had like the more entrepreneurial spirit more than anything.
Was that something that just like you just found your way with? Was there like a friend or a family member that kind of was inspiring that? Like, what was the initial move into entrepreneurship?
I think, well, it first started like in the early 2000s, where just like, the throwback jersey wave was such like a big thing, and like me and a friend of mine kind of started just buying like, from flea markets, and then being able to like bring them to like more like suburb towns, like more west, and like being able to sell them at a higher price.
Sure.
So I was kind of like in that business of just like selling clothes out of the back of my trunk for like a good like 2 to 3 years, and then
Hustling.
straight hustling. And then eventually there was a trip where I ended up taking with my cousin to the Philippines in like 2005, and at that time I was still like selling clothes, so I would always be asking my aunt like, oh, where can we find like Lacoste golf shirts or polo dress tees or whatever. And that was kind of like what I was looking for. But he was at this point where he was kind of telling me, he's like, yo, there's like, the big kind of like hustle right now is like just bootleg DVDs. Like, he was like, we would always go to this Chinese market back home where, you'd go and you'd find all the latest movies, and it was always like a 3 for $20 deal. So my aunt ended up like connecting us with like kind of like this lady that would just like wholesale like DVD movies that wouldn't be released yet, and we ended up taking like thousands of them back home. And we ended up doing them really well, sold them like super quick. We just pull up to like picnics or whatever, or just sell them amongst the family. And we ended up moving them really well to the point where we ended up kind of like starting a business for like CD and DVD duplication, where we ended up like just asking my pops for like a small business loan, maybe about like $20K, and we ended up buying all this equipment. Like, you know, at the time we're like CD towers and DVD burners, and then
Sure.
all the equipment to like be able to print on them. So it's funny because it initially just started off as like a straight bootleg business. Like, we just want to be able to like, you know, create our own bootleg DVDs and be able to sell them. But then it started getting more legitimate when a lot of my friends were like, you know, in the DJ scene, or when I started getting more into the art scene, being a part of Remix, and we started realizing that there were artists that, you know, wanted to do their mixtapes or you know, their print campaigns or whatever. So a lot of these people would just come to me, and that's how we kind of ended up legitimizing the business. So we made a company called like Blueprint Image, and we were like the go-to for like a lot of folks back home. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Right.
And then, so what was like at that point, what was the transition like? Was that introduction of producing CDs, DVDs, or like media at that point,
right,
the thing that led you to Remix?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it was like just the perfect timing, just because when we were probably about 2-3 years into like the company of actually legitimizing it and starting to get like these really good contracts. But I just really enjoyed kind of like supporting and working with artists, being able to like guide them through the process of like organizing their media and helping them, you know, working with designers on the production side of things and seeing a lot of it come to life. Just because back in the early mid 2000s, like mixtape game was heavy, so it was just like the hand-to-hand format of, you know, everything is obviously all digital now, but that was such an important grind back then.
For sure.
So I think in 2006, a mutual friend that I knew through like the clothing business introduced me to this this fellow by the name of Rich Kidd, and he ended up coming to my house, and at that time the operation was out of my basement. So like our the genesis of our relationship was just like, he was just like, man, like, you know, I'm just trying to make these beat CDs, and he's a young producer, obviously just been doing his thing in the community for a minute. He's like, man, I'm just trying to make these beat CDs, but I don't want to just like scribble on a normal blank CD and hand it to whoever industry person. I want to be able to just like make it look legitimate. So we kind of sat together, we designed like, you know, printed a CD in and around his logo at the time, and you know, I kind of just started accompanying him going to these industry parties and him handing them out, you know, whether it be to like Diddy or whoever he was trying to, whatever artist he was trying to connect with at the time. And he, literally the day after we met, he kind of brought me, he was like, man, I think you'd really like this program I'm working with. It's this new youth arts initiative in Toronto called the Remix Project. And so he brought me there literally the next day. And that was like Rich is like the seed for like everything that I feel led to my aspirations within music, and how I just grew to like appreciate the scene every more and just wanting to be a part of it. And he was really instrumental in terms of like connecting me to like a lot of the key artists that were bubbling at the time, whether it was a Drake or a JD Era or Socrates or Andrina Mill or whoever was bubbling. And you know, that just kind of became my MO in the city of being, oh yeah, like Addy's the guy, like he'll take care of you, like he's got the best price, quickest service, turnaround, you know what I mean? So like printing, you know, thousands and thousands of these units for all these local artists just out of my basement.
Crazy. I had no idea that was like
yeah.
part of your history. I don't think we ever talked about that.
Yeah.
So with Rich, when you met him, was he in Remix and it was already an evolved program? Like he was
So Remix had initially started as like a smaller like community program, but then it had officially been running as like a greater pilot, and Rich was in the very first round.
Okay.
So by the time he brought me in, it was still in his round, but he was in the pilot project. Because it used to be called a community program called Inner City Visions, that it was like a super small community, 1-room program, 1 DJ table, 1 computer type situation. But
Sure.
by that time, it would just, there was so much, I guess, like gang violence in the city, that the mandate of the government was more to invest into like community arts programming, just to help give like an outlet to like a lot of these at-risk youth.
Sure.
So that's what kind of kicked the remix of Inner City Visions. It became the remix project. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when Rich had brought me there, it was probably like, I would want to say 2006. And I just was just amazed by just like meeting all these like kids from all the different boroughs across the city, that were like super talented in their own right and just motivated in all different forms of creative disciplines. And it just brought so many people together. I just gravitated. It was like almost like Professor X's School for the Gifted, but on some hip hop shit, you know? And I just loved it, just meeting all the folks over there who are now like even like family to this day. Like shouts to Gavin and Drex and everyone that was responsible for like, you know, putting that thing together. But yeah, from that, and I just fell in love with the movement. I ended up applying for like the next round, which was round 2, and that was such a just interesting time in the city in terms of just it being such like a renaissance for like just like the art scene, you know, and just seeing a lot of really dope things. I feel like the birth of OVO was there, like, you know, like Noah, 40, and Drake literally started working together in the space, because Noah was kind of our recording arts leader at the time. So, you know, he'd be teaching the kids during programming hours, and then they would shut down, and then Drake would come, and then after 9 they would working on like comeback season, and Rich was like producing on that project. So kind of getting to kind of see that come to fruition, and then, you know, led them towards So Far Gone. And then after that, you know, because at that point it was like not possible, there was no confidence that a hip-hop artist from the city would be able to make it at such a major scale that he did.
Yeah. I've heard many conversations upstairs with people who were talking about, oh, I tried to lead this person to sign Drake, I tried to bring this person, I tried to put him on his radar, and everybody looked at me and was like, a Canadian dude? Mm-hmm. We can't sign a Canadian dude. That's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Lo and behold, man, became the biggest artist in the world.
And he's still on his run, you know. I mean? And I've been blessed, and just to be able to be a part of and to witness it from such a close space, you know. So, and even just to see the external effect of what it's done for our community and for artists coming from the city. Like, I feel like he opened the doors for so many people, and generations of even people that don't know Drake don't understand like the Drake effect in terms of like, you know, coming to the city and being like, oh, I'm from Toronto. Like, that in itself would probably get you a 5 minutes or a meeting. You know what I'm saying? Just off like, oh yeah, like what's going on over there? Like the producers, the artists, there's such a bubbling scene that like, you know, they just want to see what's going on.
And to be fair, man, honestly, like ever since I met you, 2012,
11, 12,
yeah, was like seeing how much ridiculous talent that city has.
Right.
Like, fair enough that Drake effect and the getting people into meetings, but fucking hell, are there not a lot of really, really, really talented people, and at like extremely young ages?
Right.
Like, that's what blew me away when I don't know, she must have been 15 when you brought WondaGurl here for the first time, and it's like, she just had a record with Jay-Z, and she's 15.
Right.
And like to see her bloom into like a fucking just juggernaut superstar producer.
Right.
And she's fucking amazing.
Right. Well, it's even just inspired and giving people confidence to just let you know that it's possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I feel like our class of people that are kind of born in the mid 80s, we were always we had this stigma of Toronto being the screw face capital, and no one's going to be able to break out of here. Everyone kind of just hates on each other type thing. Then you have kids like Wanda that are born, but the time she's born, she's like pretty much listened to Drake her whole life, so she's already known that it's already possible. There was no mental block of like, oh, I can't make it out of here. By that time, it was just like there was already Drake, there was already Abel, Weeknd, shouts to EXO, like all these people that are already kind of just making their way. So it's like there was nothing blocking. There was no mental block for any of these kids.
Yeah, which was amazing.
Absolutely.
At the very least, that empowerment is like the coolest shit to come off Drake's success.
Absolutely. Whether he helped you directly or not, it's just the residual effect of what he's done, is people don't even realize, what it's done for generations to come.
I mean, I never really honestly thought about it from like that aspect, which is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
Just an inspirational, like, lift the limits of what youth are seeing, inspiring like what they can then do. So when you were in, I guess it'd be like the second class of Remix. Right. That was what, like 2007,
2008. I would say. Yeah.
Year-long program?
It was, at the time, it was a 6-month program. Now it's evolved into a 9-month program. Okay. But I remember it was like a winter run. And yeah, I got into the business arts program, and it was great for me just because I think what my goal was within the program is like, I want to learn how to be an A&R. I want to learn how to organize and produce events, whether it be shows or parties. But then I had also brought everything I had going with my print company and media company with me, so it was super easy to kind of like network with a lot of the kids in our class, as well as like a lot of like the staff who were also like just flourishing artists in their own right, and be able to help service and build and contribute to what everyone was doing. So I think it was a perfect situation for me.
Give me like the breakdown of like what Remix is, because like
and in a nutshell, it's kind of like one of the first government funded hip hop schools in the world, in terms of just like geared towards talented and at-risk youth from different like boroughs across the greater Toronto area. And the way it works is that there's 3 streams of programming. There's the art of business, the creative arts, and the recording arts program. And the intake was anywhere between 40 to 60 students every round, and you were selected just basically strictly on like your potential or your need for it, depending where you were at in your career. And there was no tuition, and you just had to it's one of those things where you really kind of like get out what you put in. Sure. In terms of just whether you're endearing yourself to the staff or just even growing amongst your peers and kind of networking with them to like build your own movements or whatever. So that's what it is for the most part, just like a huge kind of like incubator in itself.
And it basically has grown from Toronto and that kind of what I guess I would say 2006, 2007 starting point.
Yeah, now we're like 15 rounds in, so easily like close to like over 1,000 kids that have come through the program. And
just specifically Toronto,
but there's even kids that have come in from different parts of the world just to kind of just because they hear about it. It's pretty much just a world-renowned program in terms of all the success stories we've had. So there's kids that travel from different parts of the world just to be in the program, to take a shot at it. Yeah.
And that's still expanding. Like
absolutely. Yeah. It's now to the point where, Remix owns their own space. So they've actually purchased a new piece of real estate, in a very like more kind of like evolving area downtown, and it's even bigger now. The facilities are better, the equipment's better. They've expanded the staff, and there's a lot of great exit strategies for Remix as a social enterprise, that where what happens when kids graduate. So whether it's reattachment to education, a scholarship program, or internship opportunities or employment opportunities with labels, like there's all these things that they're kind of building on, you know. So it's really become such a huge network, not only for the kids that are currently in the program, but it's also an opportunity for them to connect with the alumni, such as myself or Rich or Jesse Reyes or Ebony or WondaGurl or anyone else that's graduated the program. Yeah.
And so to double back with your work with Rich, I remember probably when I first met you, which now makes sense, that like you guys had the Rich Kidd beat tapes.
Yeah.
I don't know what version or volume, like the first one I have upstairs probably
Right.
is like 6 or something like that.
Yeah. Those are all printed in my basement. 1,000%. Yeah.
And so you guys started to build from that point.
Yeah.
Going into him developing as an artist as well.
Yeah. I mean, but when we met, like, he had not, I think he only had about like one mixtape he had put out with this group called Rotten Ones, which was like a rap group that he rapped and produced for. But when we met, he had just started this concept of this mixtape series that he called We On Some Rich Kid Shit, which was basically like a compilation of placements that he would get through the years, or so he ended up doing 7 volumes of that. So every year around August was like he'd come with be consistent and come with a compilation, and through that he'd slowly start to introduce himself as a solo artist, you know, sprinkling in the odd feature verse or a solo song, and kind of just grooming it to the point where he felt and I felt he was ready to kind of like debut as like a solo artist.
Yeah. And how did the rest of the crew kind of like start to fall in? Was that all like through Remix Path as well? Like what was it with bringing like Junior and Crook and Quest, and
yeah,
like how did all the like kind of original band form?
I mean, Junior and Rich and Junior were kind of like the cornerstones to like getting me just super connected in the community on such a strong grassroots level, with a strong emphasis on like community building and just supporting it. They had already known each other. Him, Crook, and Rich Jr. and Crook had already known each other from kind of like this rap hip hop collective from Mississauga called Western Union, where it was just like a circle of like producers and artists that kind of just, you know, kind of carried the same flag, but, you know, just kind of moved together. And Rit and Junior was already kind of like a participant in Inner City Visions, which was the Remix early stages program. So he was already like kind of like the OG in that sense.
Cool.
And yeah, like Rich introduced me to Junior at like a super early time. After me and Rich had just met, we went to watch Junior kind of do like a freestyle battle against like this cat Organic, who was like one of the founders of this like big rap battle league called King of the Dot. So that's how I was kind of introduced to Junior on that way too, and we kind of just stuck together. It was kind of like between me, Rich, and Junior, that was kind of our thing, coming from Mississauga, but then like getting in my car and driving down to Toronto every day, and then being at Remix for the day, and then going to different events at night, and kind of just like, you know, just being outside, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did you kind of start moving into the like show space, like promoting show, like throwing shows during events?
I think there's twofold. Like I ended up, so round 3 of Remix was like a kind of a really big round for me, even like rounds after that, but round 3 was a really big round for me because I ended up recruiting a lot of people to the program and doing like a lot of the outreach. So I brought in 2 close friends of mine who I still really work closely with today. One is this guy William Nguyen, or who he's known as Photo Will, who's like a huge kind of like promoter and marketeer. And this another cat named Jabril Jallo, who ended up forming this clothing line called Get Fresh Company. And then there's a host of other crazy people that have come, the Hustle Girls and all these other people that I helped recruit to the program. But with Jabril and Will, we kind of had the idea, you know, we have all our aspirations, whether it be in music and fashion or nightlife, but let's just rally together and kind of start learning how to throw parties and to get sponsorships. And so, you know, I think with that specific movement, it kind of pushed me towards like understanding like the nightlife and the different venues and working with DJs and how to curate these like party experiences. And then on the show side of things, I think working with Rich and Junior and like putting our own shows together, kind of like got me familiar with how to produce shows, you know, which led me to like, you know, bring Pac Div to Toronto the first time, or Kendrick Lamar to Toronto for the first time. So I kind of got to sharpen my skill in terms of understanding how to book and produce shows as well.
Cool. And that was just basically something you just picked up.
Yeah.
Grew naturally,
but there was always like the underlying strategy to everything. It was just like, okay, yeah, like book a Pac Div show, book a Kendrick show, but underlying it's just like, how do we get Rich's beats to these guys too, and how do we develop these artist relationships? And you know.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah,
good strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you guys, what I don't know. I guess that must have been not too far off our timelines crossing.
Yeah, because we had, I mean, I was already, I think before I had met you, my first trip to LA was like maybe like 2009, 2010, and like, bro, I was just like completely lost at the time, where like I just had no like idea of what the landscape of LA was, or how far spread out it was.
Yeah.
So like, I remember the first time I came here to visit a good friend of mine, shout out Vince the Barber. He was like the first kind of like friend from our circle that took the leap of faith and was just like, fuck it, I'm over the city, like let me just come out to LA and just try to like rebuild, start it anew and make it work. And at the time he was cutting in Ontario, LA, like, you know what I mean? So I kind of stayed with him out here for like a week or two, but at the time I was really like just adamant on like getting Rich like placements outside of the city.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of the compilations we were working with were super local based. And that's when I kind of started like forming the relationship with Pac Div at the time. And I just remember like, oh yeah, like we're just at the studio, they gave me the address, and this is like at the time where there was no GPS or like no Uber, so like I'm just like, okay, like, you know, I just call a cab, and like it ended up being like $200, like just to get to like to this studio. Ontario? Coming from the Ontario, yeah, I didn't know where the fuck, I don't know what the lay of the land is or how far it is, right? Yeah. But I just remember getting to this studio and just meeting like them for the first time, and DJ Dahi, shouts to him as well, like, and yeah, like that was like actually like, I think if not the first beat I played for them was the one that got placed on one of their projects. So like that was even just like an experience for me, being able to like, because Rich wasn't with me, I was just out here on a whim just trying to make it work. And you already know too, even when I met you, like it was kind of just me being out here on my own, just laying the groundwork, and then finally him coming, and then everything was already kind of set up, you know?
Yeah, no, you did a really good job queuing that all up. And
absolutely,
I feel like the first time you guys came down, it was already like a pretty well organized whole system of like, okay, cool, Rich, I think it was Rich, Junior, Crook, Quest, maybe Promise. I don't know if there was anybody else in that initial batch, but it was literally like, we're going to be in the studio like for 7 days straight. And it's like, just like, Rich, you're going to work as many hours as you possibly can. Then Maurice is going to go shoot a music video with you. Yeah. Junior and Crooklyn are going to stay here now while that goes to happen. Yeah. You guys are going to keep recording, keep working with those guys. Yeah. Rich comes back, right back into it. Yeah. Making more music. Yeah. Like it was like
clockwork.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was just the timing of it too, you know, because I just feel like it was super important for us to be able to like, shouts the truth being like kind of like the center of like being able to be able to foster like the ecosystem of like being able to tap into the community of artists that were out here, you know, because at the time it was just like, you know, we're just in like a hotel or just like a random like rental, and like you're just kind of like waiting on your ass to see if like, you know, you can end up in pulling up to a session here and there, and not really having like a home base of being able to be like, yo, you can come to us, you know. That was like that was like a game changer, you know. Like I remember like meeting Thurs for the first time, and like he was working at like Holy Grail like downtown. We were just playing him beats in his store. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he was obviously Thurs and Chris London, shouts to them, they were super instrumental in like connecting us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like once Truth kind of came into the picture, it was kind of like the perfect time in terms of being able to like tell everyone, okay, like we're set up shop, like, and it was able for him to kind of just build his new catalog with the new kind of like emerging LA talent at the time.
Yeah, for sure. So what was like, I remember when you guys were first coming down here, you guys have the grant system and like government funding, and like basically the way that whole system works is you guys just apply. Is it like anybody can apply at that point? Like if you're just Canadian born, you can apply for, if you're somewhat down the path of having a career as a musician, you can apply for a grant.
I think the way it works is like it's kind of like tiered off. So there's like a lot of preliminary like smaller grants that anyone as a recording artist can apply for, whether it's like a press kit or a website or like so those grants will land you anywhere between like 2,500 to like $5,000.
Yeah.
You know, but as you progress as an artist and you hit certain, you know, sales mandates, or you've put out X amount of projects, or, you know, you've kind of shown and proved what you've done.
Sure.
It qualifies you to like access bigger grants, whether it's like, you know, an album grant or like touring support, or, you know. Yeah. It's crazy. Like as you grow within the grant system, and that's the thing too. It's not, sometimes it's a roll of the dice, because I find there's a comfort zone that a lot of artists from back home fall into, or like, you know, they'll just like rely on the grant system.
Sure.
But sometimes it's not always guaranteed. You know, especially certain funders are only on like it may be like just a hypothetically speaking. So like, you know, like Bank of Montreal may sign on to do like a much music video award, where they'll choose like 20 to 30 artists over the course of, you know, every 6 months, and give them $20,000 a piece for a music video. But they may only be on board for like a 5-year run, you know, so it might not last the whole time.
Sure.
There's other organizations that are embedded that are, you know, it's kind of like a longer stretch that they have, but it's kind of a roll of the dice whether you get it or not. Some grants are actually guaranteed, though, as long as you hit the certain sales mandates, like you're pretty much a green light to get them once you get in the system.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, that always blew me away. I thought that was the coolest thing, because it's just nice to have. I mean, I guess it's like any relationship with like investor, entrepreneur,
right?
But it's your government. And
right.
Like the fact that you have that ability to show, improve, and repeat, and grow, and improve, and
right.
access more money, access building a career, like that was something I feel like I watched all of you guys do in like a really beautiful way that like launched full-blown successful large-scale careers, like the Rich and Sunreal project, and seeing like how that set off a foundation.
Absolutely.
Shit, Sunreal's career just take off into a superstardom kind of role too.
Absolutely. I think, you know, a lot of the, it's funny because a lot of our American homies out here call it kind of like the cheat code for us to have access to like all this funding, but the truth of the matter is that the business of music and hip hop specifically is US driven for the most part. So it's not like you can't blow or have a sustaining career as an artist in hip hop just being in Canada. That's just the reality of it. So that's the kind of, I guess the grant system is kind of like the handicap we needed to be able to like make these steps to put our shit, if not on par, on a production level with what you guys have going out here. And I just think also, like, you know, the grant system is great because and the Canadian government sees the benefit in it just because it's only promoting Canadian exports, so it's essentially just bringing more attention into our economy, you know, as for tourism and for other things. Yeah,
it's amazing to me, man. So I mean, I met you, I don't know, whatever it was, 10, 11 years ago, and like Rich was the sole focus
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you guys have rocked for that entire time.
Right.
And I watched that transition from like you said, like going from making beat CDs, trying to get people to come in, do, you know, a track, a feature, a thing,
Right.
to transitioning to working on, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 full albums with Rich.
Right.
Doing, I don't know, half the songs, a little bit more than half the songs as a recording engineer, just watching like that whole thing evolve.
Right.
And then seeing him transition to also like things clicking, tour, starting to do shows, catching a lot of momentum.
Right.
And then it seemed like it kind of, I don't know if it maybe like stalled or hit a wall. I know he had an accident like where he broke his foot.
Right.
And I don't know if that derailed. Do you think that was like a...
I don't think the ankle had anything to do with that. That was
Interesting.
That was a funny time when that happened. But I think it was just a combination of me and him in terms of our confidence in what we were doing moving forward.
Yeah.
Because I think working with you guys over here, you caught us in a really kind of like great 5-year stride where there was so much shit coming out, you know. The compilation series was a yearly thing. The first solo project that he put out was really well received. We ended up signing that deal to do the closers with Sunreal with a local label back home, and that even hit strides for us too. And then doing the Naturally Born Strangers project, which we won the Juno with, like that was just a big thing at the time in itself.
The steps were huge.
Yeah,
I remember being here with you guys when we found out you won.
Yeah, we celebrated here. We didn't think we were gonna win, which is why we were in LA at the time. So, but I just remember finding out on the phone and then popping the bottle here with you guys in Quest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what really kind of stalled us, and not just, this isn't to throw anyone under the bridge or anything. We had started a relationship with Young Guru, and he was on board to kind of just record and mix the project. But I think we didn't, coming from me and Rich's standpoint, we didn't really have all our ducks in a row in terms of having the whole catalog ready for it to be able to go.
Sure.
And then it just led to like just timing and delivery kind of like fallouts between us and him. And I think in the greater scale of things, it kind of like killed the consistency in which we were kind of like releasing material for Rich. And at the time too, I felt like we were trying to really also just scale back on like, it was almost, we felt that there was too much coming out, like it was over a saturation. So we're like, how do we like quality control in that sense?
Totally.
But I think just like that stall kind of just like was a kind of like a huge confidence killer for both of us. And you know, I just think, speaking for me personally, I just think like I just was just it was just, I don't know, maybe I was just kind of like falling out of love with the management side of things.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of just like what culminated to like, you know, 2017 in terms of just like me having to like have these hard conversations with Ebony and Rich and just being like, look, like, you know, my heart's not in it right now. Like, you guys are like family to me first and foremost. So it wouldn't be fair for me to try to stick out this journey with you if my heart's not 100% in it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
for sure.
Yeah. That's how I can reflect on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big step, man. It's hard to, it's a rough fucking game.
Yeah.
Like, especially at this level, like when you're helping people and you're focused on helping people who are still progressing in like the earliest stages of, it's like artist development, career development, learning a lot of shit along the way.
Yeah.
And it's just like a ton of work and it beats the fuck out of you.
Yeah, it beats the fuck out of you, and also just like the risk versus the reward. Like, you know, we had an earlier conversation today about being super thankful and grateful to be able to witness and work with a lot of great talent, but it comes to the point where, like, you know, you're investing time, you're investing your own financial into these projects, and you're not even getting any kind of like, you know, financial gain from it, then it just becomes so draining to the point, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like, I mean, for me, it's like the lesson I've just had to, unfortunately, like, continue to fail at time and time again was to not, like, actually sit down and, like, try to structure, like, hey, this is the business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was always kind of like, oh, man, I'm, like, if I'm either, like, giving you a discount or I'm doing studio time for free, then, like, I'm funding that, which I don't think most people actually connect the dots in that way, you know, to think, like, oh, man, this guy normally charges 100, 150, whatever dollars an hour, and we're doing this for $25 an hour. Like, somebody's eating that, you know, or doing shit for free. And, you know, it's always like, at least for me, been the expectation and like the hope that, okay, cool, we're going to build this momentum. And then as it progresses, like if the goal is to get a record deal, that'll be like a nice check. Then it'll be like, cool, now you can pay me a full rate as a studio, as you would go do with any other studio. And like having that process not actually work out that way, like time and time again, and having to go through that development stage time and time again.
Right.
And then like still trying to work out, you know, deals. Like I tried throughout all stages of my career. I always wanted to be more of like a record label management kind of partner. You know, I didn't really understand the executive producer role. I didn't really have a skill set like I do now for engineering with like recording, mixing, mastering, and knowing how to actually go through the process of making like a full song, full album, and manage the process and quality control the process. But I just more so always wanted to like be in the record label half of the music business and have some ownership of the projects that were coming out and put money behind shit. And I tried that. I just didn't really know. I honestly probably didn't even really know what I was actually trying to do at that time, because the music business is a bit of a confusing actual
and it's
business,
constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah, and that's a big obstacle too. Like I had a lot of relationships in like the blog era when that like really fucking mattered, and that could like break an artist, and it was like a great publicity kind of place to like take people. And it was like, oh man, like these guys have started to support these like live in studio performance videos that I do, or these beat making videos that I film, or these interviews with these producers. Like I actually have relationships to these places. And then it was like, well, Instagram's becoming popular and Twitter's becoming popular, and like all these places started to like seed everyone away from those blogs and like go to this place that like in the early stages was phenomenal. Like cool, you could post all your shit, people could follow you, and they'd have access to your stuff. And then over time that just like started to fade, and it started to be like, oh, Instagram's making this a business, and if you want access to the people who follow you, you have to actually pay to promote your own shit to have access to those people. Yeah, and that whole algorithm thing started to come into effect and just like fuck up that promotion thing, where if you weren't able to really like pay your way, it wasn't really allowing like that free access to promotion that like we somewhat had access to.
Right.
And then it switched over. Another like chunk of just like a huge game changing thing was the pivot to the streaming world, which like got even more complicated and even more inside like baseball. Like you know, all these record labels all have their thumbs on all the playlists and what gets popular. And so it just like continued to make it that much fucking harder to help new up and coming people and see like that actually mean anything, like have any kind of monetary return from that. And you know, for me, and that's kind of what I'm curious to see where you're at too. You know, we started to talk about it a little bit at lunch, but having to learn how to remix the puzzle a bit, you know, after all this time, and just like really taking a step back for a second. And you know, I've just been making the focus of like my time the priority, and making sure that my time is spent doing the things I'm most connected to, because I'd spent a lot of time just taking on like random publishing company, record label writing sessions with people who just don't give a fuck about music at all. And it's just like purely a motive to like get fame or get success. And that's not like the actual art form in any capacity. And it's just very draining. But doing that allowed me to actually make the money to build the studio I wanted to build. And now at this point, you know, it's like I always competed in NASCAR with like a fucking Honda Civic that I just like kept replacing parts on until I like upgraded it to the point where it could like keep up with all the other cars, you know. And now giving that car like a facelift, this studio is like at an enterprise level, world class level facility. And it's like, I don't have to do those sessions anymore. And I'm really trying to just focus on like, damn, these are the artists that I really just am super inspired by.
Yeah.
I love as people, which is another big thing. You know, like there were a lot of people I met who are just kind of not the greatest people, to be honest. And then like wanting to now really kick this into gear and being able to say, okay, cool, this is the business side of things. Like I've worked out, I think it's fair to take 5% for giving you free studio time that's not recoupable, or 5% for engineering, or 5% for mixing, and 5% for mastering, and 5% for executive producing. Like those things seem fair in the scheme of funding somebody's entire project.
Right.
And like, it's easy for me to sit down with somebody and say, hey man, this is like where I'm coming from. I want to do this with you. We could put this on paper. We could sign something. Like that took a long time for me to arrive at that model, you know, but it's all kind of been like just putting in the foundation, putting in the groundwork. Thankfully I got to meet like so many fucking amazing people and like work on so much cool stuff. But now that's really like the pivot, the focus for me is like, I want to be co-executive producing the project with like for sure the artist, and if there's one producer, then like the three of us together as a team on my side get to oversee like the engineering aspect of it, of like recording, mixing, mastering, and actually having something I can show somebody like I am responsible for like this sounding exactly the way that it sounds. If you like how this sounds, come work with me because this is the way I make things sound. Right. As opposed to like just being a recording engineer and then having some other person mix it and some other person master it, and somebody either coming to me with like a false expectation that it's going to just sound like that mastered version because I recorded it, or it's, you know, like removing that anonymous
the consistency.
Yeah, and adding the consistency aspect. And it's just super fulfilling to me personally as an artist. Like that's like my creative art form. Yeah. You know, I like to be able to actually shape the way something sounds and make it feel like pleasing in that way. Yeah. But we were about to kind of get into, with all that history, where that's led you now, and like what's current chapter and future chapters kind of looking like in your world.
I think the last 5 years since 2017 has kind of just been the soul search for me in terms of figuring out how to reinvent and pivot, as you would say, and kind of just like figure out how I can contribute and be of service to the creative community from back home in a meaningful way. Sure. So the one kind of brand that I've been working on is this concept called Riot Club, where we started the pilot project by with the help of a friend of mine named Che Katari from back home. He had been working with this artist called Mashal Montano, who was like a very, if not the most prominent soca artist from Trinidad, and he had this house in Van Nuys, you know, and you've been there. It's a pretty humble 3-bedroom bungalow with a kind of back unit that's been renovated into a studio with a beautiful pool and hot tub there. So initially, I'd came across the house through the homie Drex, who was managing Majid Jordan at the time, and they were using that house, just renting it from Che when Masha was on tour, and they were recording a lot of like the early Majid Jordan like material and projects out of there. Fast forward, you know, we were renting the house a couple times just to like for WondaGurl Ebony, just whenever she was in LA to work. And to be honest, that was always just like I feel like the next step that was always kind of like lacking in what, just, you know, being out here with like Quest and Rich and Junior and Crook, like that was always the dream, to be able to like find like and rent a house with a studio. So it was just a little bit easier to have like that access, and not be kind of like forced to be creative within a certain time span, rather than when inspiration hits, they'll just be able to go in and we'll be able to invite people, and it's a little bit more of a relaxed setting. Sure. So to come across that house, and then figuring out that I wanted to start just running these retreats was kind of like the genesis of what Riot Club essentially is, which is to export and amplify Canadian talent in the U.S. market, and build these connections where I could just help artists and creatives from back home hit the next generation hit the ground running, and kind of give them like a safe haven to be able to just create with so much freedom, because we brought it to the point where, so over the course of a month we would rent this house, and we'd have it fully staffed with like, a documentary team, a full-time chef. Junior would be kind of like our full-time engineer, and we'd host 4 to 6 artists and their camp and their teams over the course of a month. They'd obviously have 24-hour access to the studio, and then with myself, how can we just help, bring the right producers and, essentially create a culture exchange with LA, with like a lot of the community that's already here, have them come to the house, be able to meet, and also just like make meaningful like business connections with them too, whether it's bringing them to brand or to labels myself. That was kind of like the mandate. Yeah.
Sick. And so that's really the sole focus at this point.
At this point in time, yeah. We've from 2017 to 2019, we've been able to like have one retreat per year. And we've got it to the point where it's being able to be funded by a couple of great organizations from back home. I wouldn't have obviously been able to get to this point without my partners. Shout out to Dre and Bianca, that have been super instrumental in, just the overall like strategy of how the brand's going to be able to move and be flexible moving forward, because not only are we've been able to like host these retreats in LA, but we've been able to also take a lot of these connections that we've created and bring them to the city and share them with the city in terms of being resources in a very meaningful way, whether it's being able to produce panels or events or parties where we've been able to attach a lot of the Canadian talent, whether it's DJs or artists too, and provide them opportunities for their businesses to grow.
Cool. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right for now.
Is that feeling like that's kind of be rejuvenating in a way? Something to focus on? Yeah,
I think so. I think the main thing is just like, how can I be of service to the next wave of talent? I think the next step is just how do we make it so that we can make the retreats a little bit more frequent. So we want to be able to run it maybe like 3 to 4 months out of the year. So how do we build it into a sustainable and then therefore a monetized model?
Yeah,
I could just make sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I've asked you about it the last few times I saw you, but what's been like your what's the right word? Experience like going through COVID? Were you back in Toronto when that first like news started to break?
When I first started hearing about COVID, I was actually in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
With my parents. This was like maybe February, March, I don't want to say 2020. Yeah, like I feel like it's funny. I think in November of 2019 was when I last saw you. I had come out here with intentions to kind of like set up shop for everything and kind of keep the momentum going with what we were doing as we moved into 2020. But some family matters that popped up just like kind of forced me to kind of prematurely end my trip, and I had to come back in the middle of November. So that kind of like derailed the momentum of what we were trying to do. And then, so to be honest, I was kind of already in a kind of like a level of uncertainty and a rut before COVID started. I think that just like COVID just amplified it even more.
Yeah.
In terms of just not being able to travel and everyone kind of just being cooped up. So the contact with people was kind of, I think this trip in itself has been rejuvenating for me to just get used to like, human interaction in general.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, this is fucking great. I'm really happy we got to do this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Do
man.
you think you got everything you need?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like it's more, I guess, a question I would ask you. You know, is there anything that like comes to mind? Like, I feel like there'll be certain things through like this state of conversation where somebody might be like, "Oh, I forgot to think about this or that." But honestly, I thought that was awesome.
No, I was as long as
covered a
you're
lot.
happy, bro. I'm here for you. So
Yeah, no, that was great, man. Appreciate you, bud.
thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Peace. Did it record?
That's always the question. That's always the mystery because I just try to turn my computer down and